going to be in the hot seat.
Hey.
Welcome
Good
to the
day.
hot seat.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you okay. Can you hear me?
Oh, you sound fantastic. It's so good to be here with you. Hi.
Excellent. So Emily is a senior program manager with WISE. She has over 12 years experience doing work as an employment consultant and a positive behavior support consultant with individuals, families, and employment agencies in the Pacific Northwest and beyond. She also has international consulting experience working with employment agencies across New Zealand. Emily is committed to the concept of inclusion and full participation and knows that employment is critical to equity. She holds a BS in arts and letters with a focus in women's studies and English. She is a certified employment professional through APSE and currently serves on the National APSE Employment Support Professional Certification Council. Emily is a trainer and trained in the process of person-centered planning. Emily is a natural networker and believes that being connected in your community is vital to the success of connecting people with sustainable employment. Welcome to the hot seat, Emily.
Belinda, I am here and I'm feeling hot in the seat. So thank you for having me. It is such a joy to be with you. I'm like, I feel very lucky for the opportunity.
Thank you for coming. Emily and I share a lot of things. We both got the same last name, so you know she already off on the right foot. And her birthday's in May, like mine, so it's going to be a win-win today.
It is. It's a birthday celebration all around. Gemini season is among us. Taurus just ended.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So I know it's early for you, so I'm going to start you off kind. I'm going to be kind and start off to get you revved up, okay?
Okay. Got my coffee.
Ready?
Got my cat mug.
Got your coffee? All right, here we go. First question. What do you think makes a good leader or a boss?
Gosh. So to me, a good leader is someone who, and a good boss, and the two aren't necessarily synonymous with each other, but a good leader is someone who is confident enough in themselves and their beliefs and is grounded in their values and ideas that they feel comfortable bringing people along with them. They're like, yeah, I feel so firmly and believe in what I do that I am comfortable teaching and guiding and supporting people, and also values and wants other people to be successful. So someone who's not competitive or threatened by other people's success, but really is like, I feel like, let's all do this together. Here we go. Yeah.
Okay. What makes a good coworker?
Oh, well, Belinda, I'm someone who loves fun and I love humor. So I am a firm believer in a coworker who likes to laugh. This is like a personal, not deal breaker for a coworker, but for me, it's like, ooh, fun, humor. Because let's be honest, work and life and all the things we're doing it's not just like puppy dogs and roses all the time. It's like there's challenges, there's things that you have to navigate. And so people that can be, I guess, bring levity to it, to their work and to their life, that's helpful. But also people that are great communicators. And I would say leaders in their own work and right too. Confident in who they are, not competitive, but like collaborators. Those are all qualities that are important to me. And I strive to do that as a coworker as well.
Okay. So what makes a bad leader or a bad boss?
Ooh, bad leader, bad boss. I would just say people that feel threatened or competitive and or maybe siloed in their own, like they're so caught up in what they're doing that they can't see the team effort, and they don't have the ability to collaborate.
Okay. And what makes a bad coworker?
Oh, I mean, the list goes on and on, Belinda. No, I mean, I feel kind of like I'm being repetitive in the sense where it's like you'll hear things like quality, connection, relationship, but um, for me, I've had a difficult time working with people that communication wasn't important to them, or they were just like going fast. They're gonna go on, they're gonna charge ahead, and who cares if you're coming with me? So I think it's more about uh, people that can find the time to figure out like the gel of our working styles.
Okay. So you have probably worked at more than one place. Let's say that. So you probably worked at more than one place. Think back. Don't count the current place you're working at, but think back at other places you worked at where you had a good boss and what that person did to make you be like, this is a good boss. This is a good leader. Not where you're working at now, but where before. Other
Yeah,
jobs.
yeah. Take me back to my sushi restaurant days in college. No, um, I'd say that quality of people who are kind and invested in the people that work for them is always a quality that stands out to me. And that kindness can look like remembering your birthday, or making small subtle efforts to be like, I see you. Your work is important to me. You as a worker are important to me, so I'm going to just like acknowledge you as a human being within this establishment. And that has always been a quality of uh, bosses, leaders, people that I admire.
Can you think of one? Does one come in mind that you've had in the past that stands out that had that for you?
Yeah, when I was in college, I worked, and I've had my fair share of the good, the bad,
Right.
not the ugly, the good, the bad, and the different bosses and relationships. And yeah, when I worked for a nanny, or I worked as a nanny when I was in college, and I worked for just the most lovely, gracious family.
Mm-hmm.
And what was really cool is you could see that this wasn't something that they were doing just with their relationship with me. It was like they walked this walk with everyone they interacted with. So they were just this kind, and they continue to be
Mm-hmm.
kind and lovely, gracious people who valued humans, which really resonated with me as someone who had the opportunity to work for them,
Right.
but also just as, being a person who was coming to age as an adult, where it's like, oh, it's important to treat all people with kindness and respect.
Right.
If you have the opportunity to supervise people, like acknowledge them, embrace them, support them, care for them. I think that type of engagement, it's like people remember how you made them feel, and I remember that stuck with me.
Excellent. So, can you think of a time where you had a coworker? Again, you can't use your current job. You got to think past that. A coworker that you just like, they stood out. They stood out to you that you still remember, and they were a good coworker. Can you think of somebody and what made them that for you?
Yeah. It's funny, my current job, and that I have so many lovely and wonderful coworkers that I have the opportunity to work with. Um, but it's someone who has worked at this place and has moved on, but has worked with me, and we've kind of overlapped in our careers. But what stood out, I think it was all the things I was talking about earlier in a coworker, where someone who was like, they are funny. They still prevail as someone who has a great sense of humor, but a hardworking person who was just such a joy to be around, but also is like so grounded in their values and the work that they were doing. It is inspirational to be around them. It's like, oh, just when you meet someone, you're like, gosh, you are just such a good human being. Like,
Right.
I want to be with you. I want to be
Right.
around you. I want to know you. And I feel like this person, for me, I just felt really lucky to work with them and be inspired by them and still get to know them in other capacities. And I felt like we always had fun working together, but we also, like, we knew we were going to pull our weight. We were going to get the job done. We were going to make sure that the work and I guess like the values, the goal was centered, but we were going to have fun doing it. And it wasn't going to be like, okay, here we go. But it's like, we're going to get this done and we're going to do it together. And it's going to be a really great time.
Okay. So let me ask you this. Let's think of the opposite of good. So bad. Think of a time where you had a bad boss or leader, and what made them a bad boss or leader in your eyes?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm like, my mind, Belinda, goes to like theme songs and soundtracks. Right. I'm like, I feel like we need a music break here. Let's see. So yeah, and without being like, well, the opposite of the good things I said about people is they were terrible and they were rude. But I think the times where I've had unsupportive work situations have been when the focus of the leadership was really about what they were doing and not including everyone on the team. And I've felt the impact of that as a worker, where I've needed support and I felt like I didn't get the support I needed, or I didn't know how. And I've had, the good thing is anytime you're in any situation, you have the opportunity to learn and pivot and think about, what works best for me and how do I move forward, and what works for my communication style. Or, any opportunity to have a difficult conversation is always a good conversation. So I think it was around, I guess, communication and not ensuring that everyone is moving forward as like a unit, but it was kind of siloed.
Right. Now, same thing with a coworker. Can you think of a time where you had a coworker that you would consider a bad coworker or a needs improvement coworker?
Well, yes, it's like we can pick it all apart, but I'm thinking, Belinda, about my very first job I ever had when I was 14. Okay. And I was a busser at a chain restaurant. And that was kind of my first exposure to the work world and coworker dynamics. And I just remember it's like, oh, all work is admirable and important. And I realized really quickly that being a busser wasn't for me, because at this particular restaurant in Oregon, you could still smoke cigarettes. And I thought, smoking cigarettes and smelling like hamburgers, or the smell of cigarette smoke and diner hamburgers in a polyester outfit at the age of 14 is not for me at 6 a.m. on Saturday morning. But some coworker dynamics where there was power dynamics, and I got to experience that, where it was like the servers, they tipped out the bussers, and I remember feeling like, oh, I'm slinging all the dirty cups, and I'm having to get that person who's pretty naggy extra coffee, and like, I'm the interface, and yet I'm only getting tipped out like $3, and I'm the one who has to like graciously bring the change to the servers. And I just remember getting to see just kind of the imbalance of power dynamics in work world, and like having to navigate different communication pieces in like a work setting with someone who's like, no, this is the way it is. And I'm very grateful for the gift of moving on from jobs that aren't the right fit for you, because that is a gift in itself and a privilege.
Well, let me ask you this. Why do you think that is important? That when you're with a job that it doesn't fit you, why do you think it's important to move on? And how do you move on appropriately?
Yeah, so I'm like, funny story, Belinda, from that job, I moved on inappropriately. I called up at 6 a.m. and I said, I can't come into work today. And I said, I can't come into work. And they said, today? And I said, ever again, goodbye. And I hung up. And my parents, who were my ride to work, were just shocked that I would behave so badly. And I have since then learned to quit a job with dignity and better communication. But I think if you don't have the right fit in your work, you'll burn out, you'll feel morose. I mean, there's all the things, because the work is something where it brings us pride, it brings us connection, it brings us money, it brings us opportunity, it brings us growth. And so if you're feeling stagnant, or if you feel like it's a toxic environment, it won't last. And I think the way that you move on is, with grace and communication and adequate timing. But I do think about the opportunity to have had that experience and quit in such an atrocious way. And I mentioned that moving on from a job is a privilege, because, as you know, the people that we have the good fortune to work with, for many people with disabilities, it's like, I've heard the conversation of, oh, the job didn't work out. Well, maybe they just don't want to work, or maybe they can't work. And so just that ability to quit and move on is something I don't ever want to take for granted. And also, I know the value that for all people who are working people, we have to acknowledge that it is about fit. It's about finding the right, finding the thing that sparks us. And if it doesn't, if it's not there, it's a call at 6 a.m. in your smoky uniform and hanging up on the boss. So
that's exactly. I think a lot of people miss that, because it's like, no, here's your job. You can, this job, and we expect you to stay here for the next 20 years. And if you look at all of our careers, it's like, I haven't been here 20 years myself on one job. If I don't like it, I'm not a tree, I can leave. And so that's what I always say. You're not a tree. You're not stuck here. So, we can move on. But back to you, because I want to focus on you. You're in the hot seat. Tell us your strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah. I would say my strengths are, I'm a relationship and connector person. So I love meeting people, seeing people, learning about who they are, and then connecting them with somebody else that has similar, like where there's that, not serendipity, like the spark, the togetherness. And so that's one of the things I love about getting to do the work of employment, because you really get to be like, who are you? What does thriving look like? And then how can I connect you to this other person or this entity that's like the same or interested, or there's overlap? And I love getting to see when people connect, and I love to meet people, and I guess I'm really lucky and fascinated by getting to know humans in all sorts of capacities. So I feel like I'm in the right field for that, and I'm a really relational person. And then other skills, I'm kind, I'm funny. No, I'll move on to the weaknesses. So yeah, for weaknesses, I would say, and I think weaknesses, it's like it depends on how you look at it and when you look at it. So it could be a gift at some time. I would say I'm a sensitive person, not to my detriment, but to the point where sometimes I'll like spend time. I'm a sensitive overthinker, Belinda, and I think it's a skill in the sense that and it ties back to being connected to people, where it's like I worry about people's well-being or an interaction sometimes, where it will not stun me where I can't move forward, but it will slow the movement.
Right.
And I think I'm at a point in my life where I'm always trying to kind of not sharpen that, but think about how to use it as a skill and not get stuck in it as a weakness or sticking point.
Why do you think people get uncomfortable when they're asked, tell me your strengths and then your weaknesses? Why do you think that?
Gosh, well, I mean, I felt like I not shimmied in my seat, but I was like, oh, I think sometimes it's hard for people, and I can only speak for myself, but for me, like talking about yourself in a positive way, it's really easy to talk about other people, and and the things that and see and love about them. And not that, I mean, hopefully we all are finding time to love ourselves and see ourselves as skilled, smart people. But I think it's almost like you don't want to feel arrogant. It's almost like a self-conscious thing. And then to be honest, I think it's easier for people to talk about like their weaknesses sometimes, in the sense where it's like people can kind of berate or be down on themselves. So I think a skill for us all to practice, and this is coming from a person who's thinking about this for myself, is not necessarily thinking about the weaknesses as like a bad thing, but thinking
Right.
about it as like an
Right.
objective, like, what is good about this, or how can I hone it, or how do I lean on one part of it, but like not get stuck on this other element of it.
So, would you consider yourself a good leader?
Yeah, I would consider myself a good leader, and the type of leader that I want to support. Well, I follow my vision, and I also want to support people around me to be successful. And I believe in people, and I'm collaborative. And so for the type of leader that I admire, I feel like I'm striving to be that for other people when I can.
Do you think that people, because you said a good quote, you was like, I found my vision. Do you think people who have not found their vision, because sometimes, you're here, I need to be married by 25 and my first house and blah, blah, blah. When people who feel like they haven't found their vision by a certain age,
Mm-hmm.
and they're just, maybe going job to job, what would your advice be to them in finding their vision?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because I think something you said earlier, Belinda, was really important, where it's like there's no rules. Well, you said people are like trees,
Right.
and you can get up and leave. And I think it's an important thing for us all to remember. It's like the expectations that we're creating around work. It's like something we've learned, but why can't we stop and think about, like, well, to find the right match, or to find the job that's a good fit for us, needs to have all certain elements that we can control. And so if that shifts over time, it's because you're a human being who's living and breathing and a changing person. And I think if you haven't found your vision, or if you haven't found the right match, maybe it's a matter of pausing and reflecting about what is important to you as a person. What do you need to thrive? What does thriving look like to you already? And how and where do those pieces exist in the work world? Because so often I think people either stay in something too long because they feel obligated, and to the point where it burns them out, or they need a job, so they're like, I'm just gonna, I
Mm-hmm.
just need a job, I'll do any
Mm-hmm.
job. And it's being thoughtful and taking time. And if you just need a job, and I'm putting it in quotes because I've heard people say that a lot, it's like doing that, but also doing some work around, like, well, what is important? What does thriving look like? What would thriving look like? What are the qualifiers that are needed for you to be successful in a work environment, long term or
Mm-hmm.
longer term?
Okay.
Does it exist?
So Emily Harris is hiring, right? What type of employee would you want to work at your agency with you?
The Emily Harris
Is hiring.
agency.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say, uh, do I, what is my agency? I decide what my agency does.
Yep. You paint the picture.
I made the business. I want to hire someone who is smart, flexible person, not like in how flexible in how they move in work, and maybe they're flexible too, but it's not a deal breaker if they aren't physically flexible, but willing to pivot, uh, and be able to try lots of things, but also someone who is like aligned in the values, because I think and creativity too, Belinda, because I feel like our values are what ground us and drive us and who we are as human beings. And that's something that's harder to shift and teach. But our creativity is something that I want someone to be flexible with and fluid, a great communicator, uh, funny, good taste in music. Coffee drinker? No, not a deal breaker. And also, someone who loves people as much as I do, because even a quality that's important in a coworker that I didn't say earlier, and maybe it was implied, but I like to work in the type of environment when we are in person, where it's like, hey, Belinda Harris, how are you today? Like, I am so glad to see you.
Right.
Like that sort of, I like to connect. I want to connect with the people I'm working with. And so what wouldn't work for me is working with someone where I'm like, hey, Belinda, how are you? It's so great to see you. And you like lift your book up higher, or like, pull the shade down like that. And I've worked with people like that, which is fine. It's like, go on and pull the shade up and have fun. And they're probably like, oh gosh, here comes the cheerful coworker. And I think that's important, right? Because it won't last for either person.
Right. So everybody show Emily some love. Give her some hearts. She did a good job today. This is her first time on Instagram Live. I asked somebody in my office, I said, should I go easy on her? This is the first time. And it was like, no, don't go easy on Emily. She can handle it. She did a good job. She was cool. She was calm. The purpose of sitting in the hot seat is that people get nervous at interviews. You see, Emily was cool as a cucumber, but people get nervous at interviews. And I'm doing this show to show people it's not so bad. You talk about yourself, you think about the questions and you answer them. So Emily, I want you to tell people about you, how they can get in contact with you. You're up.
Okay, Belinda. Well, first of all, one of my favorite Harrises in the world. I'm like, are we unofficially related because we have the same last name? I think we are.
That's right.
Yes, this truly was an honor. And if this is you being hard on me, I'm like, yo, I'd like to do this every morning. And I'm like, please let me be your cheerful coworker. So to get a hold of me, reach out to me, Emily@gowise.org. I work for a great organization, which I'm like, if you know Wise, you know who my boss is, a fantastic human being, and maybe you've had the good fortune to know some of my wonderful coworkers as well. But yeah, check us out, gowise.org, Emily@gowise.org. Find me on LinkedIn. I also have, Belinda and I were joking, I have a DJ account where you can, if you sleuth enough, you might find me on there on the internet. But I'd love to say hey to anyone.